Hello everyone and welcome to Financial Intelligence. In this video, I want to talk about the recent stimulus and relief package programs. On the surface, these programs are supposedly designed to assist the middle class during the pandemic. However, in reality, they are structured in a way that they will directly or indirectly benefit the upper class. Since it is sometimes difficult to see how these programs indirectly enrich the wealthy, I decided to show you one solid example of how these programs directly benefit the upper class. Note that I'm not against the principle of helping the people in need, especially during the pandemic. What I am opposed to is using our compassion for people in need as a game of smoke and mirrors to transfer wealth from the middle class to the upper class. This video has 3 segments. Number 1, I'm going to quickly cover where the money from this program is funneled to. Number 2, give you a solid example of how this program directly benefited the upper class in expense of the middle class. And number 3, my simple recommendation as to how these programs should have been implemented. Number 1, overview of stimulus and relief packages. So far at the time of recording this video, we have had 5 stimulus and relief packages. The total money the government has borrowed to fund these programs is about $5.6 trillion. Just to give you an idea of how much these programs cost per US worker, we can divide the total cost of these programs, which is $5.6 trillion, by the number of employed US workers, which is about 125 million people. If you do the math, the cost per US worker is about $45,000. This means that each American worker has to be taxed an extra $45,000 over their lifetime to pay for the cost of these programs. I understand that some of this money was paid to families in the form of stimulus paychecks, and some of it was used to run the public services during the pandemic. But a big chunk of this money is gone forever, and it is transferred from the middle class to the upper class. Allow me to explain this with one solid example. Number 2, example of how the CARE Act benefited the upper class. Let's take a look at the 3rd stimulus and relief package, which was the largest so far and was dubbed the CARES Act. The total cost of this program was $2 trillion, of which $560 billion was distributed to individuals, $500 billion to large corporations, $377 billion to small businesses, and $340 billion to state and local governments. For example, let's focus on this little section highlighted here, which shows that $58 billion out of the total $500 billion allocated for large corporations was granted to airline companies. I totally understand that we needed to support the airline companies during the pandemic, especially thousands of airline workers who would have lost their jobs because of something that wasn't under their control. However, what I don't understand is why we also had to pay for the salary of highly compensated CEOs and executives of these companies. I'm not gonna post their names here, but let's take a look at how much the top 3 airline CEOs are making right now. Delta Airlines CEO is making about $17.3 million a year. United Airlines CEO is making about $12.6 million a year, and American Airlines CEO is making about $11.6 million a year. The question is, if the goal was to make sure that these companies were not going to go under during the pandemic, did we really have to also keep paying their CEOs their full salaries plus benefits? If these companies needed to survive, we should have injected just enough capital so that they could make the payroll for their hardworking staff. Why should the government, in other words, taxpayers, continue paying their extremely well compensated CEOs during the pandemic? I don't think that anybody needs to be making $17 million to survive the pandemic. All they needed to do was to order some food and watch Netflix like the rest of us. In a real capitalist country, these CEOs would have lost their jobs, period. However, they got to keep their jobs because the government is willing to tax the middle class and distribute it to these highly compensated CEOs and executives. In other words, the upper class. Of course, I only showed you a few individuals who benefited from these programs. In reality, there were many, many more who gained from these programs. Number 3, how these programs should have been implemented. In this section, I'm going to propose an alternative approach for implementing these programs. And in all honesty, this is not rocket science. It is super simple. If we wanted to rescue these companies, we should have given all their employees the same amount of financial support regardless of their position. If the stimulus checks are enough for middle-class families, it should be enough for upper-class families as well. Why do we need to sponsor their CEOs' expensive lifestyles if the only goal is to assist their companies to live through the pandemic? Nobody needs $17 million to survive a pandemic, in my opinion. We could have reduced the size of stimulus and relief package programs significantly if we had treated all families the same. I hope that you liked this video. If you have any suggestions or feedback, please add them in the comment section below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Also hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any of our future videos. Thank you and take care.